Hey everyone, it's Lindsay with High Altitude Astrology bringing you another chart reading. And today I'm going to be reading the chart of Kate Spade. And if you don't know who she is, she was originally a bag designer and then developed a brand that was used to create all sorts of retail items. And unfortunately, she passed away recently, a couple days ago, from suicide. And it's very sad because she has a 13-year-old daughter that she left behind, and also a husband who made a statement about the situation, wanting to clarify some of the rumors that had come about as a result of what had happened. And essentially what he said is that she had been struggling for, I believe he said, the last 5 years with depression and anxiety, and had been seeking treatment for it as well. He said that they were living separately for the last 10 months, I believe, but that they were not discussing divorce, and that it was completely unexpected. And nobody thought that it would that this would happen. So I wanted to look at her chart to see what might be going on, and there's definitely a few things, but let's first talk about the natal chart. If you want to follow along, she was born on December 24th, 1962 in Kansas City, Missouri, and I could not find a birth time for her, so I'm working off a solar chart, and I won't have the exact moon sign to talk about. But we can see right away that she has a 2 degrees sun in Capricorn. So she's somebody who's going to work hard. Her sun trines Pluto widely. It trines Uranus. It sextiles Jupiter. Her Pluto and Uranus are in Virgo, and her Jupiter is in Pisces. So these aspects, help bring even more focus and inventiveness and really sort of an optimistic energy to her self-expression, which draw people to her as well. And she also has an interesting aspect with Venus and Neptune. Her Venus is at 19 degrees of Scorpio, and her Neptune's at 14 degrees of Scorpio. When we think of Venus, that's our creative expression, for one thing. And Neptune has to do with that ability to tap into the more transcendent energies. So this is where some of her creativity comes from. In Scorpio, it's going to, bring a lot of passion behind her creative expression, a lot of power and drive. But what's interesting is that Neptune at 14 degrees of Scorpio squares her Saturn at 9 degrees of Aquarius. And I wanted to read something I found about natal Saturn squaring Neptune from Astromatrix. And they write that the square indicates inner tensions and frustrations, and it's likely that Neptune will be inhibited from true realization and be bound within the unconscious mind by the barrier-forming restrictions of Saturn. This will cause Neptune to be agitatory, stimulating unconscious fears, anxieties, phobias, morbidity, and guilty feelings arising from an overactive imagination which lacks suitable channels for a more healthy release. The consequences of this inner pressure and disquiet tend to create feelings of inadequacy, incompetence, and inferiority. These may be quite illusory and unrealistic, yet they have a powerful influence on your actions and choices. So I wanted to point this out because that Saturn, being a Capricorn sun that she is her star of destiny. And so when anything's happening to that planet in her natal chart or by transit, it's more significant. And what this is saying is that really sometimes her Saturnian energy would suppress that ability to tap into that creative expression and to really allow that transcendent experience within herself. And so when it's suppressed in the unconscious, then it's repressed, and it manifests in lots of peculiar ways. And I did see a video of her talking about having anxiety in her life. The general feeling I get about her is that she's kind of got this sort of push-pull energy in her chart. It's like she's strong, but at the same time she's very sensitive. That that Venus Neptune is very sensitive energy. But then with the Saturn there, it's kind of like, almost like inhibiting the expression of it. But at the same time, the Saturn squaring the Neptune can create the dynamic of really having to work at something over time and learn how to tune into and express over time more of the planetary energies that it's affecting. I also wanted to point out that her Mars at 24 degrees Leo, which is another creative expression, because Mars is how we assert ourselves. It's our action energy. And Leo, ruled by the sun, is driven because it wants to express the self, and it wants to radiate and shine out into the world, and it wants to be seen, for its self-expression. So to have Mars in Leo would be somebody who is driven to assert themselves in the world, or to put their stamp on things in the world. And she literally did with that tag on her purses. She had a tag that she would sew onto the outside of all of the purses that identified her brand. But that Mars in Leo at 24 degrees widely squares the Neptune and the Venus conjunction. So let's think about that. It's like you've got this Mars energy that really wants to create and wants to express, but then you've got this sort of dreamy Venus and Neptune energy that's more about, wanting to just, in some ways, kind of transcend the more materialistic things in the world. So sort of this dynamic, and Mars is one of the co-rulers of Scorpio, which her Venus Neptune is in the sign of. So that's showing us some sort of conflict with self-assertion, versus this kind of intuitive, creative person. And it's very good to have this energy for somebody who does want to create, because that tension, will keep kind of bringing us back to how do we resolve this, and how do we kind of get this energy out into the world, so to speak. The other thing I wanted to bring up about this, and I don't know the real details of her life, obviously, but to have Venus conjunct Neptune squared Mars could be a symbol of some form of addiction. And although her husband says there was no alcohol use, and she was being cared for under the care of a doctor in order to deal with her anxiety and depression through the use of medication, this pattern, because Mars is about our actions and our assertion, and again, Venus Neptune can be wanting to transcend that somehow. Sometimes with the square, we can want to take the fast track to transcendence, because we just want to get out of it, we just don't want to feel the way we're feeling. And if there was anything more going on, this would be an indication of that pattern. She probably would have been somebody who would have done really well if she had pursued perhaps some kind of meditation or something that allowed her to access that transcendent experience, but in a more controlled manner and in a more subtle manner too. And what's interesting is that she was having Jupiter by transit going over that Neptune, and this started in December of last year. Jupiter went retrograde in June, just when this happened, and let me confirm that exact date here. Excuse me, it was already retrograde, but it went retrograde right on her Neptune the week of her taking her life. And then it would have gone direct, well, it will go direct in July, and then eventually it would have moved off of the conjunction to her Neptune. So let's think of that. Jupiter is expansion. Jupiter is growth. Jupiter is philosophical perspective, things that grow and expand our world, opportunities and growth and luck. But, you know, Jupiter's in Scorpio right now. So it's about growing through the transformative process. That's very different from just Jupiter alone. You know, it's about growing through facing what's in our unconscious in order to let go and release and be the phoenix rising from the ashes, renewed and rejuvenated. So that energy was going over her Neptune, and I would say the highest expression of that could have been, yes, she found some sort of spiritual outlet for herself that allowed her to kind of detach from these mundane things that capture our attention in life, but that we have to do in order to survive. You know, if she had perhaps found something she could have connected with in order to learn about letting go and not being as attached to the, you know, thought process, something like meditation may have helped her. But the other symbol of this at its sort of more base or lower expression, you know, could have just been some form of expanding and growing whatever addictions, you know, she may have had, because Neptune, especially near Venus and squared by the Mars, again, can be a symbol of addictive tendencies. And you know, it could have just been really drawing her, you know, more and more further into that part of her energy dynamics. I wanted to point out a few other transits that are happening for her, or were happening for her. One is that transiting Pluto in Capricorn was conjuncting her Mercury at 18 degrees, and this started in February of 2017, and it would have completed in October of 2018. And, you know, Pluto moves so slowly through the solar system, 200 and something years, that it won't always even conjunct any of our planets in a lifetime. So to have it on your personal planet like Mercury, which deals with your thinking and your communication, is very rare. And her Mercury is very well aspected. It's sextiling that Venus-Neptune, and it's trining that Pluto-Uranus conjunction in Virgo in her chart. And that's really about all the aspects that it makes. So she has a fairly healthy looking Venus. And it's all of those aspects, by the way, that helped her kind of you know, do her work and implement her ideas, basically. But to have Pluto right there on it, Pluto, again, is about transformation. It's about really focusing and concentrating our energy and really being able to use the power of focus and concentration to progress. And, you know, it would have been a great time for her to perhaps, you know, study something or just really have a lot of power behind whatever it is she was interested in saying or researching or looking into. Because, you know, Pluto can also, when it's expressed in another way, deal with like obsessive thoughts and, you know, when it's not really expressing itself like through the light, and it's being more repressed, it can come to us as like obsession and, you know, really trying to control things. And so it's possible that there was something, you know, that was difficult for her during this time as well. And the other thing I want to say about transiting Pluto on the Mercury is it's a good time to really look more deeply at what's in your unconscious. It would be a great time to have discussions with a therapist, or, you know, study something that allows you to do more self-reflection in your life. And I wanted to read something from holmaastrology.com, and they write about Pluto conjuncting Mercury by transit. It says, Pluto's influence in the natal chart is never a passive one. It demands it demands truth. Its demands for truth often brings out and challenges conditions and power struggles that need to be faced. You cannot ignore Pluto, and during this time, your will is tested. Your judgment intensifies, and you are able to examine anything with great insight. What you may dig up may not always be pleasant, but what you find will be the truth, and these truths have to be dealt with. Do not ignore what Pluto is trying to convey. It's important, and changes may be necessary in order for you to rise above details and position yourself so that once this transit's over, you've made the necessary changes, preparing for what is yet to come. It's often a transit of magnificent changes and transformational experiences, although possibly challenging in nature. So that was what was happening by transit to her Mercury. And another transit that was going on at the same time is that transiting Saturn was on her Sun. Now, this is a transit that happens once every 30 years. And Saturn is about, you know, foundation and discipline and structure, and it can feel limiting, and it can feel like it's a time where we're being asked to figure out what's really working in our lives and letting go of what's not. And so when it conjuncts the Sun, which is the life force and the vitality, you know, it's a time where we might feel less able to really shine in the way that we're used to, you know, because it's asking us to kind of take stock of our life and find out, you know, what's really serving us and letting go of what's not. And there's a reading on jessicadavidson.co.uk, and she writes about the transits of Saturn to the Sun, that it's a time to evaluate your identity and how you're doing and see whether you're living up to your highest potentials. If not, you'll be forced to grow, to take responsibility, and she says, get your shit together. This is an opportunity to test yourself against reality and make progress towards becoming who you really are, so it's best to take a constructive approach. And she also says some possibilities with Saturn transiting the Sun is promotion or recognition for your work, starting a new business, working on creative projects. But then she also says there can also be stress and burnout, depression, low energy, difficulties with the father. And some people talk about how it can also bring up relationship issues, which obviously her husband said they were going through. So that was another kind of heavy thing that she was going through right now, you know, and she really just, you know, again, it's this thing where she's a strong person, but she's also a sensitive person. And it's just so sad that, you know, this had to happen. And if she had consulted an astrologer, I'm sure they would have been able to say, hey, you know, at this time, you know, these different patterns will shift and change. And, you know, that's the beauty of astrology, is it can give you some timing insight as to when you will begin to potentially, you know, feel differently. So this has been my interpretation of Kate Spade's astrology chart, and I just want to, you know, offer a prayer to her family and to her daughter, and just hope that, you know, they really come together and support one another and you know, get through this really challenging, difficult time, because there's just no preparing for something like this in our personal lives. So thank you so much. If you like this channel, please subscribe. I also have a website. It's called highaltitudeastrology.com. You can find me online. I write a daily blog. You can sign up to receive it in your email if you're interested in knowing what I have to say about the daily planetary energies. Thank you so much. Adios.